Boom. What's up, you guys? It's Royce Jacob, and welcome back to another edition of Trader Tips. In this one, we're going to be talking trend lines. And before we proceed any further, I need to say this. If you do not believe in the fact that trend lines work, and if you do not believe in the efficacy of trend lines when trading, then you simply haven't been trading for long enough, and you simply haven't spent enough time looking at charts. But I know you guys are smarter than that, so let's keep going, okay? In this one, I want to talk about how I draw my trend lines and how I trade based upon the trend lines I draw. If you have been watching my videos for any meaningful amount of time, then you definitely would have heard me use some of these terms before. Those terms are absolute resistance and conservative resistance. And if you follow along with the newsletter, then you definitely know. But I'm going to explain those, okay? And to do that, we're going to take a look at two different charts. The first one being Unity. I actually just finished recording a video on Unity, and I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to record this video. Because again, this is the perfect example, in my opinion, both short-term and long-term. As we zoom out, you'll see what I'm talking about, of these lines of conservative resistance or support and absolute resistance and support. Okay, and we'll also take a look at the OG riot as well, because there's a good example there too. Okay, so Unity, you can see here, shorter term, we're in an ascending channel. An ascending channel begins pretty much whenever there's a shift in trend. Okay, so you can see here, the shift in trend was on the back of this. Can you guys see what pattern this is right here? That's an inverse head and shoulders pattern. Going to be making another one of these on that right after this, okay? Right after you see this one. But whenever a trend shifts direction, okay, and you can see here, there is a macro shift of direction, okay? Break in trend. We plateaued here. We kind of, again, the inverse head and shoulders sideways trading range. We bottomed out here back in August, okay? And from here, we restarted the uptrend. Now, it's important to remember that we are still in a long-term downtrend, which we're going to talk about after this. And you can see those long-term lines of conservative green and absolute resistance blue. But we'll get to that right after this. Okay, so short-term, we're going to talk about this ascending channel here. So once again, an ascending channel, the top line of resistance will start at, the first high prior to a pullback following the reversal. Okay, so we draw the first line here, and to explain conservative and absolute resistance, okay, I'm sure just by looking at this, a lot of you can already figure out what I'm doing here, but I say conservative resistance because I'm using multiple touch points here, okay, excuse me. Absolute resistance, it makes more sense to start there, so I'm going to say absolute resistance, we're using the absolute touch points. Okay, the highest, most touch points on a singular trend. To be honest, right here's a better example because there's only a singular candle wick, which actually got eaten up super fast. So this is an example of real absolute resistance. Okay, you're only using, from the point at which you're starting to draw your trend line, you're only using one touch point, and that touch point is even less, in my mind, even less valid if you're utilizing only a singular candle wick, especially one that just gets eaten up super fast. Okay, and on top of that, typically when I'm drawing trend lines for trading, obviously for trading purposes, but for like swing trading purposes, for slightly longer term, like how I gauge my trades on a medium to long term, so talking a few days to a few weeks, talking about that time horizon. You guys know this. I like using 4-hour candles. Okay, 4-hour candles and daily candles are typically what I go by. When I draw trend lines, I almost exclusively base them upon 4-hour candles. Okay, so I don't think I've ever said that before, but now you know. And you can see here that, again, this 4-hour candle got eaten up super fast. That creates this purple line, absolute support. And then this red line here is still a line of support, but that is conservative support utilizing more than one touch point, okay? And I'll just say this now. I will always trade upon the conservative lines that I draw, okay? So again, where am I taking profits? I'm taking profits once we test conservative resistance. Okay, some traders may wait. You may be able to squeak out a few extra bucks if you wait for that test of absolute resistance or this yellow line to take profits. But that's where it's important to not get greedy. Okay, greed is a killer of you, and if you don't imagine it doesn't get there. Imagine we just reverse upon this line of conservative resistance, which I've seen happen plenty of times before, because everyone's trying to front run the competition. That's the trading game. If it reverses and you're waiting for that test, you're holding call options, you're waiting for that test of Jesus, getting too excited here. Love these conservative and absolute lines. But if you're waiting for that test of absolute resistance, you're holding call options, you see a reversal, you're like, no, I'm going to hold out. I'm going to wait. And it never happens. Then you're screwed. Those call options are going to zero. Okay. So don't get greedy, especially this is obviously more forgiving if you're just trading shares, common shares. But if you're trading call options, you might not, those things might go to zero. They might go from making you a whole lot of money to going to zero if you're waiting for those absolute trend lines to be hit. Okay. So from a trading perspective, that's all I'll say there. I will always, always, always trade upon lines of conservative resistance. There are also, like Bitcoin is a great example of a chart that almost always tests lines of absolute resistance. On that note, we'll just go to Bitcoin just so I can elaborate on that. But absolute lines of resistance, I would say 50%, I don't know, 50% of the time I'm not even gonna lean towards one direction. They absolutely, pun intended, I guess, are tested, okay? But as a trader, if you're just trying to not get freaking too greedy, I do recommend always trading off of these lines of conservative resistance. And you can even see here, this is a good example of a line of absolute resistance that could be tested. The more long-term, the more macro, the more likely I believe they are to be tested, to be completely honest, which is kind of makes sense with Bitcoin. I do think it's possible that this line of absolute resistance is tested, but where would I take profits? Where would I skim some profits at least? It would be right there. Okay. Utilizing more than one touch points. I do think that this will come into play right here. And, that's a big spread, but, better safe than sorry a lot of the time. Okay. So we'll take a look at Bitcoin. Let's take a quick look at BTC. We got the head and shoulders, potential head and shoulders. Let's hope that's ruled out. We'll see what happens there. But, absolute resistance. Let's see what we're talking about here. So let's go to daily. I don't have any perfect examples drawn here. Let's see if we can just get one going right here. Why is this zooming like this? This is so annoying, you guys. Why can't I get to my freaking thing? Oh my gosh. All right, well, here, let me refresh the page quick. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. I didn't realize my whole window was shifted over. Okay. Well, this is the guy who you're taking technical tips from. Anyway, Bitcoin, you can see here, if we just freaking zoom out back to Unity. My gosh. Okay. Bitcoin here, if we zoom out, you can see, we'll just draw some lines of resistance right here. Okay. This is a good example. Let's see what happens. Okay. Using there's a lot of touch points here though. Yeah. You could say right here, this is like conservative resistance, and then this is absolute resistance. This is a bad example. I should have just stuck to my examples, you guys. That's why this is a members video, and this is absolute resistance. Okay, but see, it's just to say this was the initial line of resistance, which is the conservative resistance right here. I'll just make this yellow. This was conservative resistance. It still broke above that a couple times, prodding the bull traps, but ultimately came below there. But you can see over once this was created, this became the line of resistance, which these two candlesticks then kind of proved. Okay. Also broke above it, came back down, or tested it multiple times as new support. So these lines of absolute resistance absolutely do matter. But personally, I always trade off of conservative resistance. Okay. So right here, you can see Riot, kind of similar downtrend to Unity, but there are this line of absolute resistance did come into play here. You can see here, major touch point here, the first initial touch point on this long-term downtrend right here, came, tested, initially created this trend line right here, the line of conservative resistance. Okay. but then broke above it slightly, created this line of absolute resistance, which we didn't test from February of 24 until November of this year. But this trend line did come into play. Okay, this is a line of absolute resistance. The green line did come into play perfectly here on November 12th. Okay, so once again, if you don't believe in stick figure trends, just look at more charts. Okay, and right here, you can see on a shorter term time horizon, there is going to be a point at which we see what happens here. So follow along for yourself, okay? This is absolute resistance. This, once again, conservative resistance, okay? Where am I taking profits on riot calls? It would be conservative resistance, okay? So from current levels, that would be like a 10.4% rally, okay? Again, that's only the difference between 10.4% and like 12.9%, which could result in, a meaningful amount of extra gains, a little cherry on top. But I don't care about that cherry on top sometimes. I don't even like cherries. I just want the Sunday, and as long as I get the majority of the gains, I'm good. Because again, imagine you're holding calls, you're waiting for that test of absolute resistance, the stock reverses, doesn't come back up. You lose all of the gains you had. Okay, you get no Sunday. All right, so that's that, you guys. As you can tell, I didn't plan this video out insanely well, but I was inspired to make it. I do think that this is important for you guys to understand. Again, you're probably familiar with this if you've just been tuning into any of the content over any meaningful amount of time, but I felt like making a video discussing this specifically would be helpful. So I hope it helped you guys out, and let me know what you guys think and which technical patterns you want me to discuss next. Okay, appreciate you watching. Until next time, always remember, take action, make waves. Peace.